Hi guys, welcome back to What the Horror, the channel where we talk about horror movies old and new. So with the recent release of Halloween Ends, the third and final installment in the David Gordon Green trilogy, I thought it would be fun to tier list the entire Halloween franchise. That is all 13 movies, including Halloween Ends. For me, the Halloween franchise has always been one that I have enjoyed. I have watched since I was a teenager, but it's never been my favourite horror franchise or favourite slasher franchise. Laurie Strode is not my favourite final girl, and Michael Myers is not my favourite masked killer. I do prefer the Scream franchise and Sidney Prescott and Ghostface as my final girl and go-to killer. But as I say, I do like the franchise. And in preparation for the release of Halloween Ends last Friday, I have over the last few weeks rewatched all of the previous 12 films. And with this rewatch has come much more of an appreciation and enjoyment of this franchise. I like this franchise more than I thought I did. And I also realised that this franchise has a Halloween movie for everybody, for everybody's taste. I never noticed it before because I think on the surface it looks like Michael Myers slowly walking and stalking either babysitters or family members, and it's a lot of knife kill after knife kill. But if you want a good to the core classic horror movie, there's the original. If you want something a little bit more wacky and balls to the wall bizarre, you have Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. If you like a little bit more of a cult in your horror movies, you have the Thorn trilogy. If you want something with 80s aesthetic or 90s aesthetic or 70s aesthetic, there is something from nearly every decade. If you want your horror movies darker, grittier, gorier, then you have the Rob Zombie remake and its sequel. And if you prefer more modern horror movies, then you have the most recent trilogy. There's honestly a Halloween film for everybody's taste. So after rewatching 12 and watching the 13th movie in this franchise, how would I personally rank them? Well, we're going to do that today, and the rankings I have 5 of them, and we are going with Absolute Classic, A Scream, Kills 2 Hours, Not For Me, Pure Evil. Now, an absolute classic is pretty self-explanatory. A Scream is one of those that's a really good time. It might not be the best of the best, it might not be going down in history as a classic, but it is a damn good time. Kills 2 Hours is one of those that it doesn't make you think too much. It's not the most fun, but it's easy to stick on. It could be just an easy watch. Not For Me are those ones where I might be able to appreciate what the film is going for. I might appreciate that it has its own fan base, but for me personally, this is not to my taste. These are not ones that I am going to reach for as often. And Pure Evil, again, self-explanatory, just the worst of the worst. Okay, so we'll go through all 13 movies, we will rank them and talk a little bit about them, but I will probably talk a little bit less about the original and the latest one, only because with the original, how much is there that you can say that hasn't already been said? And with Halloween Ends, while I will share my thoughts and opinions on that one, I have done an in-depth, spoiler-free and spoiler review of that, which I will link here, so if you want to know more of my in-depth thoughts on the most recent installment, you can go check that one out. Okay, so first up we have Halloween 1978, and I don't think we even need to beat around the bush, do we? This one is an absolute classic. I'm only kidding. God, can you imagine if I actually put it in Pure Evil? You guys would just all unsubscribe. Yeah, this one is a classic for a reason. Halloween 1978, John Carpenter, they took what Peeping Tom, Psycho, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Black Christmas all started and just ran with it and really created the blueprint for what we know and what we expect from slasher movies today. This introduced the virginal final girl, the final girl circuit. This movie has been referenced, studied and parodied to within an inch of its life. What they created with the soundtrack, the camera work, the storyline, the actors is just, yeah, it's brilliant. It really is good. For me, I do find it a little little bit slow and boring at times. If I'm wanting a little bit more excitement, I will probably pick a different Halloween movie. However, if I'm wanting something to chill out to relax to, an easy watch, I will stick this one on. Are you still with me despite me calling it slightly boring? I do love this movie. I do love it. It is an absolute classic. Don't get me wrong. Okay, next up we have Halloween 2. This one for me is a scream. This one is a good time. I think Halloween 2 is a very, very strong sequel. This one works as a perfect double bill. If you watched the first one and then this one straight afterwards, this is a perfect double bill. It's very believable that these two stories take place on the same night. Am I more likely to watch Halloween 2 just on its own? Probably not. I do think it works better as a double feature, but I really do enjoy this one. I think it's a shame that we don't get as much Laurie Strode in this one, though. She's pretty much relegated to a hospital bed for the majority of it. Yeah, I know people do struggle with that, but for me, I think that the sudden shift in Dr. Loomis from, pretty professional, pretty on the ball in the first one, maybe a little overdramatic, he just shifts to full on wackadoodle in this one. He is an absolute joy to watch. He really is. He's one of the best characters in this franchise, and that shift and how entertaining he is to watch can slightly make up for the fact that we don't have as much Laurie. And the fact that we don't have much Laurie also gives the film more of an opportunity to zoom out from her experiences of the night, and we see much more of the town. We see news reports, radio reports, people finding out, like the sheriff, about his daughter Annie. And that was one of my favourite things about Halloween Kills, is seeing more of the town of Haddonfield's trauma and the effect that these events have had on them. So I enjoyed that. I also think that the kills are far more varied and far more interesting in this one than the first one. First one is a lot of strangling and stabbing. This one, you have the woman's face been melted off in the hot tub. My favourite, I think, has to be the one where he gets the nurse in the back with the scalpel and he manages to lift her off the floor. Whether or not that's actually doable, I don't know, but I think what it clearly shows us is just how strong and how dangerous Michael Myers is. And I love that her little clogs, her little shoes fall off as well. One thing that bugs me about it, though, is we don't really have the answer of what happened to Jimmy. Did Jimmy die? Did he survive? I mean, he looks to me like he just passes out. It doesn't look like he dies. So if he does survive, he obviously had a little thing with Laurie going. So does that make him Jamie Lloyd's dad in Halloween 4? If you guys know, because I'm sure there are people who know much more about this than me out there, I would love to know. Let me know. Did Jimmy survive? Do you think he survived? And is it implied that he is Jamie Lloyd's dad later on? Okay, next up we have Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. And this one for me, it could be a scream, but I think I'm going to go with Kills 2 hours. I don't know. Okay. Yeah, we're going to go with Kills 2 hours. I might regret that later on. It really is 50-50. I think my opinion changes between It's a Scream and Kills 2 hours, but we'll go with Kills 2 hours. What we got with Season of the Witch was just an absolute bag of bizarre, wasn't it? Really. And even though this is really wacky and bizarre, I would say this is one of the darkest in the franchise in tone, because I mean, this one kills kids. This one melts a kid's face and turns it into bugs. And they want to wipe out basically all kids. So it is really dark in tone, but there is also a lot of humour in it. Honestly, Tom Atkins' back must be hurting carrying this movie on his back, because a lot of the people in the film are meant to be robots. They're not real people. There aren't many characters per se, so we get a lot of time with him, and he's he's making some acting choices, and he's definitely a screen presence, which is wonderful to watch. I'm all for it. The few characters that we do get, I think, are pretty good. The bad guys, Colonel Cochrane. He's a pretty good one. I like even the little side ones, like the town drunk in where the Shamrock factory is. The couple that own the RV, I think that they're really flamboyant and over the top. So yeah, not many characters, but the ones that we have, definitely interesting, and I think maybe more memorable than some others in the franchise. Okay, next up we have Halloween 4. This one for me is a scream. It might not be my favourite in the franchise, but it is a good time. Halloween 4 is the beginning of the Thorn cult trilogy and introduces us to the character of Jamie Lloyd. She is the daughter of Laurie Strode, who has been written out by being killed off in a car accident. We never know that I know of who her dad is, but like I said, if you have your theories and you think it is meant to be Jimmy, then do let me know in the comments. Jamie Lloyd for me is one of the best things about Halloween 4. I'm not sure I would be as good without her inclusion. I think her sharing the final girl spot with her foster sister Rachel is a brilliant combo, both lovable, likeable characters, and I really like that family dynamic, even though they're not blood related, care very much about each other and just makes them more endearing. It does baffle me though, and we'll get to it when we talk about the next film, but it just, because of how strong the character is and how much it elevates this movie, it baffles me beyond words, beyond measure, the choices that they make with this character in the next film. But we will save that for the next one. For this film, I think this also has some of the most beautiful opening credits. It definitely has the most Halloween, autumnal or fall, October feel to it. The beautiful colours, genuine autumn setting with genuine orange leaves is one of the best ones. And despite a ridiculous looking mask, I think that Michael Myers in this one is pretty good. Like I said with the other ones, at this point they are up in the gore and the violence, and this guy comes into town and just, yeah, he's blowing up petrol stations or gas stations. He's wiping out an entire police force in the station. This is a Michael that's not messing around. It's just a shame about that mask. And for me, I don't really know how I feel about the ending of this movie. I kind of have mixed thoughts on it. I get what they were going for. Maybe I don't. I don't know. I think I know what they were going for. But for me, it just feels like a hopeless ending. It's like, okay, yay, let's celebrate. Michael Myers is defeated. You know, we've won. The evil has gone. And then it's, oh, no, it's not. It's just passed on to somebody else. Which is kind of a familiar theme if you've seen the most recent, spoiler warning, recent film. I think it's a common message that they've tried to address throughout the franchise. And that is that evil is undefeatable and inescapable and inevitable. It's a really cheery message, don't you think? Okay, next one. We have Halloween 5. This one is pure evil. I just can't bring myself to like or enjoy this movie. It is just bad writing. So bad. I cannot understand why they decide to make Jamie Lloyd, the best character of the previous movie, a mute, and like in Halloween 2, where they relegated Laurie Strode to a hospital bed for most of the movie, they relegate Jamie Lloyd to the children's hospital bed for most of the movie. And the other bad decision that I don't understand is Rachel. It's great to see the return of Rachel. Their dynamic, brilliant. But we hardly get to see them together, and Rachel is now no longer this strong and clever and caring woman. They kind of turn her into this bimbo that just walks around in her knickers, and I don't know why. I don't know why they reduce that character to that. And then when she is ceremoniously killed off by Michael, why does no one mention her for the rest of the film? Why does Jamie Lloyd never ask where she is? She shows so much concern for Tina, but never asks about where her foster sister is. It doesn't make sense. It's bad writing. And the explanation behind the ending of Halloween 4 isn't really clear at first. At first you might think that it's a dream, and then it transpires that actually the mum was attacked. But did Jamie Lloyd do it? And she did it because Michael forced her to do it because now they're linked. But why are they linked? This wasn't a thing in the first one. It wasn't a thing in the second one or the fourth one. I'm annoyed just talking about it. I mean, we do get the introduction now of the Thorn Cult and the Man in Black, so we are starting to delve into that. So the mystical side of it, yeah, it ties in with what comes out in the sixth one and the cult, but we don't know enough yet for any of this to make sense. So it just comes out of nowhere, doesn't make sense. You've got rid or changed two of the best characters, and so instead we have to spend the majority of this movie with Tina. Tina is annoying.
It looks so good.
I mean, she's maybe not as bad as some people give her stick for, but she's just annoying. And I just don't understand the amount of concern and love that Jamie Lloyd has for her out of nowhere. And Michael's different in this one yet again. In the fourth one, he was a force to be reckoned with. He took out an entire police force, left them in bits all over the place. And then for some reason now in Halloween 5, he's become more of a prankster. I mean, he lets out the dog Max to scare Rachel. And then when he kills Tina's boyfriend, but wears his mask pretending to be him to trick Tina, he's just wasting time playing these silly pranks and tricks on people, and I don't get it. And talking of Max the dog, families in Halloween movies, I implore you families that are targeted repeatedly by Michael Myers, please stop buying pet dogs. Stop having pet dogs. You know how it ends. For them, it doesn't end well. I will say though that the Cookie Woman scene never fails to make me laugh.
Cookie Woman.
Cookie Woman.
I mean, I love it. That is the best part of this film. The last act though, the third and final act, the final girl circuit, just goes on for so long. And I'm just so very bored with it. I struggle with third acts of slashers anyway. I don't like it when it's down to the final girl and the killer and they're just chasing them through the woods. I like it when it's creative. And this one is not only creative, it's boring. And I tend to find myself doing other stuff rather than watching the end of it. Okay, I am fully aware that this next one I'll be judged for. I will. I'm expecting it. But we have Halloween 6, and I'm putting Halloween 6 in It's a Scream. I think I really unironically love this movie, but I am fully aware of the trash fire that it is. This is a mess, and I know it's a mess, but I've watched this movie twice now, and I can't bring myself to dislike it. It's just such a good time. There are of course two versions of this film. There is the director's cut and the theatrical cut. I can't remember which is which. I think the theatrical cut is the one where it was just butchered and there's loads of scenes missing from it. And so if you watch that one with those scenes missing, there are things that happen in this film that just don't make sense. There are huge chunks of exposition and information missing, so you're probably watching it going, what just happened? I was lucky when I watched this, despite watching the one with scenes missing, I did already know a little bit about it going in, so I didn't feel fully lost. But I would love to know if any of you have watched it with those scenes missing and thought, what is going on? This makes no sense to me. This is the one where we are fully in the territory of the Thorn Cult. And I don't know how many people feel about it. I don't mind it too much. I mean, we've had all different explanations up to this point about, why Michael does what he does. So I don't mind too much about the cult aspect. The thing that I don't like is what they do to Jamie Lloyd's character. The whole thing with her and her Uncle Michael and the baby, that's just ick. But also just, I guess they had to change the actress because time had passed, she had to be older, but just, getting rid of Danielle Harris and also just killing her off in the opening, I don't like that aspect of it. But the whole cult side, the mystical side and the runes, I don't mind it too much. I absolutely love Paul Rudd as Tommy Doyle in this. He's like this creepy little golem creature, especially the scene in the hospital when he's walking out with the baby and he's all hunched over it, like, my precious. Yeah, he's just this creeping creeper who stares out of his window at the, oh, what's her name? Like the final girl, she lives in the Myers house. He's just watching her undress through a telescope. But yeah, it's a good portrayal. It's enjoyable. I really wish he could have come back to play Tommy Doyle in Halloween Kills. He was up for it, but he was already tied in and contracted to do Ghostbusters Afterlife, so that's why we didn't get him and we got the other one. And there are very few slasher characters that I despise as much as I despise John Strode. He got what he deserved. That is one death where I was cheering it on because he's really difficult to watch for so many reasons. Just how he treats his family, his dialogue, his attitude. He's despicable, and it's really fun when he gets what he deserves. I think I meant to say gets his just desserts. So yeah, despite this being an absolute hot mess, I am fully aware that it is. I mean, the Myers house is probably one of the weakest in it. Michael Myers has these weird sticky out ears on the mask, which I don't get, and it has parts of the story missing, and then now this whole mystical side. It's not going to be for everybody, but I love the 90s aesthetics of it. It's really cozy for me, and I think that the lead woman and her son are characters that I enjoy to follow. I like Paul Rudd's creepy creeper, Tommy Doyle, and I do think that despite the funny sticky out ear mask, this is a good Michael Myers. This one moves faster and seems more intimidating and more powerful, and I find this one much more intimidating and scarier. Okay, next we have Halloween H2O, talking of 90s aesthetic, and this one for me is an absolute classic. I love Halloween H2O. This one is tied with the first one for my favourite of the franchise. So Halloween H2O is one of the first in this franchise that I watched when I was younger. I watched the original one and the second one, and then I think it was this one. And so this one, like the first two, just has more of a, like an emotional connection to it. This is one of my earliest watches of this franchise, and one that I love to rewatch as well because of the cast, because you have Michelle Williams, who was in Dawson's Creek, you have Josh Hartnett from The Faculty, you have LL Cool J, who I had known from Deep Blue Sea. So yeah, I love this one. I also think this has one of the best openings, one of the best, the cold openings. I love that they bring Marion Chambers back, and I think that this is a horror character that makes really smart decisions. She thinks something's up in her house, so she doesn't go in. She goes next door and she gets the boys to, come and investigate. When she goes back in again, she thinks there's something wrong. She leaves, she nopes straight out of that. She doesn't risk it. She goes next door. And I love the direction they go with this. This is a character that makes smart decisions, and yet this still isn't enough to save her. She's still taken out by Michael Myers, and I love that it flips that on its head. Because how many times as a horror fan or an audience do we scream at the screen, you're making a bad decision, just leave the house, just get out? And so she does that, and it's still not enough to save her from Michael Myers. I think it really sets up how dangerous Michael Myers is and just subverts our expectations as an audience. Another personal reason why this is one of my favourite Halloween movies is because one of my two favourite horror movies of all time is Psycho. I adore that movie, and the fact that Janet Leigh is in this, which is amazing in two ways, because she is Jamie Lee Curtis's mother, and also she is Janet Leigh. She's Marion Crane from the shower scene in Psycho. She's one of the original Scream Queens. So having her in this film is wonderful. But also there's the scene where she's talking to Laurie, and then, she says the line about, oh, can I just get motherly for a moment? It's very meta. And then she walks away and you can hear some of the score from Psycho playing over it, and then she walks to a car, which is the car that she drives in Psycho. So yeah, that's just a little personal thing, but I absolutely love it. It plays into my nostalgia and my love for that movie. And I think, like Halloween 2, this one has a really good setting. Like the isolation and vastness of the hospital in Halloween 2, the private boarding school here where majority of the kids and staff have gone, you've got a big space, but it's also very empty, very creepy. And I think that schools and hospitals at nighttime in the dark are really unsettling. It's kind of something meant to be safe and familiar, but just at a kind of a different time of day, it suddenly becomes really eerie and creepy. I think that this one probably was influenced by Scream in the fact that it's quite meta and referencing the genre that it's in. It's very aware that it's a horror movie. You have Scream 2 on the TV. You have lots of other nods, like I said, the ones for Psycho. You have the kids in the beginning. I think one of them is called Jason and they're wearing hockey gear. So it's very self-aware and influenced by slasher teen movies of the time. Oh, I also never noticed before, but I loved this. On this rewatch, I realised that Josh Hartnett, the son of Laurie, his friend Charlie, he's played by young Alan in the original Jumanji, not the new one, like proper old school original Jumanji. He was the young Alan, so I loved that. Like I said earlier, I am really funny with third acts of slasher movies. Do find them quite boring. There are some that I love and do it really well. This is one of them. This one is not boring. It's engaging. It's well paced. There's a variety of settings. You have good fight scenes between Laurie and Michael. You also have other people coming in to be taken out to throw you off. And the fact that you have a false ending. You have the fight and then he's been carted off in an ambulance, but then Laurie goes off again and we have this additional bit which, if they hadn't done what they did, if they hadn't retconned it in Resurrection, this would have been an incredible ending. This, for me, might be my favourite of the different timelines. I think watching the original, Halloween 2, and then this one, I think this works really well as a trilogy. It's an incredibly interesting study of how Laurie deals with what happened to her, and then this is quite a cathartic ending for her, and it's such a shame that they retconned that and took that away from her in the next film, which we will talk about. Okay, so next we have Halloween Resurrection, and are we all agreed? Say it with me now. Pure evil. This film sucks. I mean, let's just address it. The opening of this film is terrible for multiple reasons. A, the dialogue is shocking. It's just exposition dump central. There is no genuinely natural dialogue or interactions between these characters. You have the two nurses giving you the exposition, vomit of information. One of them says to the other, don't mention anything about it in front of her. Then they go into the room, give her her meds, and then that nurse that said don't talk about it, talks about it and says that she has too much guilt on her or something. Come on, script. Revise your script. And like I said before, they retcon this wonderful ending that they had for Laurie, this ending to her journey of trauma and, processing what had happened to her. And now she's taken away from her son. She's locked up in the psychiatric hospital. She's murdered somebody innocent, which is just another trauma for her. And that's how they end Laurie Strode. That's how they end that story, and how it was ended for, 16 years? It's just a slap in the face for horror fans and Halloween fans. Oh, and another thing, we're still talking about this opening scene, not even into the main bulk of the movie yet. There is a scene where two guards are investigating something. One of them stops to get a snack from a vending machine, literally round the corner from the next room. The other guard goes in, he's attacked, killed by Michael's screams. The guard getting a snack runs as soon as he hears the scream, runs round the corner, and within that time, Michael Myers has killed the guard, removed his head, put it in a washing machine, and then climbed up into the rafters of the roof. I don't believe that for a second. It's bad. writing. Do you remember back in the early 2000s when movies couldn't be written, especially teen movies, without everyone being mean to each other and sniping at each other? You know, women were so cruel and mean, and men had to be creepy and pervy. I mean, you have a guy in this film saying, "Donna, you've got great legs. What time do they open?" You've got another guy who walks into a dorm room of two women and sniffs their underwear in front of them. I mean, it's... this film exasperates me. There's a reason why I watched this once about 18 years ago and then never revisited it. And I think after this rewatch, it's safe to say I'm probably never going to revisit this movie again. Okay, moving on from that trash fire. Next up we have the Rob Zombie remake. And this one is not for me. Okay, I have a mixed relationship with Rob Zombie. I can appreciate some of his movies and I don't like others of his movies, and you can call me a prude. I just don't like the language and the grittiness of this movie. I think that some of it is just too much for the sake of being too much. And again, like Curse of Michael Myers, the sixth one, you have the director's cut and the theatrical cut. I have now seen both versions, and I have to say, I think it's the director's cut, is it, that's a little bit longer, has more in it. That one, again, this is another reason why this one is not for me, because in the director's cut there is the inclusion of an SA scene, which is just so uncomfortable, so unpleasant, so nasty, doesn't need to be in there. And I mean, you know it doesn't need to be in there to progress the story because there is the theatrical cut that doesn't have it. And I think that, that one for me, that's why it's not for me. I can appreciate that people are a fan of this movie. I can appreciate the positives in it. I don't hate this movie. It's just not for me. And that scene is one of the main reasons why it's not for me. I will say though, great cast. Brilliant cast. There are so many horror alumni here. I mean, you have Sid Haig in it, who works in the cemetery. You have Dee Wallace. She's Laurie Strode's adoptive mother, I guess. You also have Brad Dourif, who is, for me, the best thing about the Rob Zombie remake and its sequel. You have the return of Danielle Harris, which is wonderful. And you also have, I can't remember which version it is. I think it's the theatrical version, but one of the guards escorting Michael out is actually played by Bill Moseley. Okay, next up we have Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. And again, I'm going to put it in not for me. However, I actually prefer Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 to his remake. I think this is the stronger out of his two movies, and that's because in this one they drop the pretense of this being a Halloween movie or a remake of a Halloween movie. In this one they fully lean into Rob Zombie's style. This is a Rob Zombie movie. He has much more freedom to do what he wants. There's no recreation of, scene for scene, dialogue for dialogue. So I think that this works much better. If you go into it not expecting it to be a Halloween movie, yeah, I like this one a lot more. I would probably rewatch this one over that one. Like I said, I think that Brad Dourif is the best part about these movies, especially in this one. I know it's been said by people before, but when he discovers Annie, it's absolutely heartbreaking. He really acts his socks off in that one, and Danielle Harris in it as well. It's the dynamic between her Annie and Laurie is really incredible, and I think I found Laurie quite difficult in parts of this film because, like Annie says, Laurie wasn't the only one who experienced that night. Annie was attacked. I know Laurie lost her parents, but Annie was physically attacked, and seeing the different paths that the two girls go down, how they deal with it differently, how Annie takes on this quite parental role towards Laurie and looking after her dad, and deals with things in this really quiet and inward way, while Laurie is just very outward, screaming, angry, black walls, black nails. And that is a really interesting thing to watch. I liked that. And I do love the little family dynamic of Laurie now moving in with Annie and Sheriff Brackett. I couldn't remember his name then. I think that's really nice as well. while it's not for me because there is still a lot of that grittiness there, it's a difficult watch, but I think in a different reason. The remake I didn't like so much because of the essay scene and the language. This one I think is quite a difficult watch because it is such a study of grief and trauma and people's pain, and you have a lot of heavy scenes that are emotionally draining, that it's not one you can just stick on and relax to. I understand it's, you know, some people's comfort movie, but for me it's more of an emotional roller coaster, so I can appreciate it, like this a lot more, but it's still not really for me. Okay, now we're moving on to the new trilogy, and starting off we have Halloween 2018, which for me is a scream. I really like this one. I know this trilogy has been pretty divisive. All of the installments have been divisive. Not everybody likes it. I really do like Halloween 2018. This one is again a reset of a timeline. This one is now a direct sequel to the first one and ignores all other movies. This one retcons the idea as well that Michael and Laurie were brother and sister. They do address it, but they dismiss it as it's just a rumor and a story people talked about. So they strip that right back to the first one, and they also strip back any mystical, magical, cult explanations. This one is seated a lot more in realism, and that Michael is just, you know, he's evil and he's a serial killer or a mass killer. And again, like with a lot of the franchise, they're looking at the aftermath of the effect, the trauma that Laurie is experiencing. She goes a little bit too much down the Sarah Connor route, you know, being this superhero badass. But it's interesting because it's a different direction to the Laurie we got in H2O and seeing how she dealt with the effects of the first two films. This one also has some of my favourite scenes from the franchise. It has that incredible long shot, that long take where it follows Michael down one of the streets and he's going in and out of the houses. He takes a knife from one. He makes you panic because you think they're actually going to kill off a baby in this one, but they leave it. And it just follows him, this continuous shot. I love that. But I also love the sequence where Vicky is talking to the boy that she's babysitting, and I love that they play with this idea. You know, kids think there's a monster in my closet, there's a monster under my bed, and as an adult you reassure them, you say it's nothing, it's just your imagination. But with this, no, there is a monster in the closet. There's Michael hiding in there, and I love that they turn on that. And it's sad that they killed off Vicky. I really liked her as a character, and I loved her with the boy. Their dynamic was really nice, their friendship. So yeah, has some of my favourite sequences in the whole franchise. One thing I struggle to get on board with though is the sudden shift in Michael. Now I know that we have a much more modern audience, and the level of violence and gore in films and aggression, you know, we expect a certain different level. But you know, if we are following the original, we go from that Michael who very quietly and stealthily slips into Haddonfield and he kills in the shadows and he hides what he's done, to this Michael who comes in and smashes people's heads in. He rips their teeth out. He just comes in like a bulldozer. I mean, honestly, he's smashing heads left, right and centre, and if he's not, he's hollowing them out and making them into a jack-o'-lantern. I'm just saying, what was this guy reading in the hospital? Because he's got more creative with his kills. So yeah, Halloween 2018, I really enjoy this one. This is one that I think I will rewatch more than some of the others. And, you know, whatever people's opinion of the franchise, the trilogy and how it's ended, I still think this as a standalone one is pretty good. Okay, we're down to the last two. Next up we have Halloween Kills. And this one for me is a Kills 2 hours. And that's because I kind of have a love-hate relationship with Halloween Kills. I've only seen it twice, once when it first came out, and then once a couple of weeks ago, or maybe last week, in preparation for this episode. When I first watched it, I was 50-50 down the middle. There were things that I loved about this film and things that I hated about this film. And that's why I didn't rewatch it for so long. And I was really hopeful that with watching Halloween Ends, that would retrospectively make Halloween Kills better. It would make things make more sense, because this one struggles by being the middle movie. It has that kind of, it's just flirting feel to it. Watching Halloween Ends did not make me like Halloween Kills more. It did not make Halloween Kills make more sense. Look, in this one, I love that there are nods to others. I love that we get the Silver Shamrock 3 Halloween masks. I love that we get the return of Marion Chambers and Lindsay Wallace and Lonnie and, you know, even Tommy Doyle. Not my favourite portrayal of Tommy Doyle, but having these characters back was really nice. I said earlier, I can't remember which one it was, maybe Halloween 2, where I like that they zoom out from just Michael and Laurie. I like seeing the after effects and lasting effects that the attack on Halloween night 1978 had on Haddonfield and the people that live there. And in this one, we really get to see that. We get to see the effect on the cops, on the children of the people who were there, of the people who were attacked by it. I really do enjoy that. They go too far with it, in my opinion, with making the mob. I think that while they are definitely trying to say something, it's just unpleasant to watch. That scene in the hospital where the mob gets carried away and it ends up with the death of an innocent man. That scene, I don't think it upset me, but it annoyed me. The scene at Laurie's house where the firemen arrive, that is pretty badass. I'm not gonna lie, that is brutal. And the scene where Michael emerges out of the house with the flames around him, it's pretty iconic and pretty epic. I think it's safe to say, I at least think I'm right in saying that Halloween Kills has the biggest body count in it and the most, you know, blood and gore. I think it does give Rob Zombie a run for its money anyway. Yeah, really creative kills. Some of them I think are enjoyable. Sometimes I think it goes too far. Sometimes I think it becomes a little too mean. Some are really quite sad and some are really creative. Like the scene where Marion and the nurse and the doctor, husband and wife, get attacked. That's a really good sequence. And finally, Halloween Ends, the latest in the franchise, came out last Friday. This has been a polarizing movie, like this whole trilogy, to be honest with you. There seem to be people that really loved it and people that seem to have really hated it. And I do feel bad for those die-hard Halloween fans because I can imagine there were choices in this that you weren't happy with. Yeah, I can imagine maybe feeling a bit more strongly about it if I was a die-hard fan, if this was my favourite franchise. As it is, I just like this franchise. I'm not die-hard. So for me, Halloween Ends kills 2 hours. Now, I have done an in-depth, spoiler-free and spoiler review of this, so I'll leave a link so you can go and watch that if you want to know more of my in-depth thoughts about it. There are things that I really enjoyed about it and things that I didn't enjoy about it. There are things that I thought were interesting. They started going in a new and interesting direction, but unfortunately, they didn't follow through with that. The questions that were raised through the introduction of the character of Corey weren't resolved. I think they just didn't know how to wrap that up. And not only were those questions not answered, but things that were raised in Halloween 28 and more so in Halloween Kills, like the fascination and draw of Judith's window where Michael would stand and look out at Haddonfield and him ascending the more that he kills. A lot of these aren't answered, and I do think that that is a shame. It would have been interesting if this was the first of the trilogy, and if they could have explored it a little bit more, maybe people would be more open to it. But as the final installment in the trilogy and potentially the franchise, it's not going to be. I think it just, yeah, interesting choices. I didn't hate it. I actually liked this film. I did enjoy it. I think the opening or the first part of the film, really, really strong. And the ending, really, really strong. But it lost me in the middle. This for me could be one of the best performances by Jamie Lee Curtis as Laurie Strode. It's definitely up there with Halloween H2O and the original one. I thought this was a beautiful balance of the badass of 2018, but also the sweet innocence and kindness of the original. I loved her relationship with Frank, the interactions between them. I liked that we saw her trying to move forward with her life while juggling her scars and the accusations of responsibility for what happened, the guilt that sits on her for feeling a sense of responsibility for what happens. So definitely an incredible Laurie Strode, some beautiful visuals in it, great soundtrack as well. I'm 50-50 on Corey, But yeah, I can see how some fans would be disappointed and, you know, a little bit annoyed. I am interested to see how opinion on this changes with the passing of time. Season of the Witch came out, people hated it and wrote it off. But time has passed and it's become a little bit of a cult classic. And I would like to see what happens with Halloween Ends, with the passing of time, or this whole trilogy. Let time pass, move on from the disappointments and expectations, and also with the hindsight of other movies. I mean, when we got Halloween Resurrection, I mean, it made, you know, other movies in the franchise look not as bad, didn't it? So we'll see. Okay, so there you have it, guys. That is my ranking. We have 2 absolute classics, 4 that are a scream, 3 that kill 2 hours, 2 not for me, and 2 that are just pure evil. And I'm sure quite a few people might agree with me on those bottom 2, maybe not. I'd be interested to know your guys' rankings. If you want to use my same ranking, then list yours down below if you have a different ranking. But give me reasons as well. Give me thoughts on Season of the Witch. Give me thoughts on Halloween Ends, on Curse of Michael Myers, those controversial ones. Yeah, I would love to know. Because as I say, this is a franchise I don't necessarily love, but I have come to appreciate a lot more. I've really enjoyed spending the last 2 months in the world of Michael Myers, Haddonfield and Laurie Strode. Okay guys, so that is it for me today. My next episode that will be coming out next week will be another truly horror episode. It will either be the true story behind The Conjuring 3 or the true story behind Annabelle. But either way, if you are not subscribed yet, don't forget to hit that bell so you don't miss out on those. And don't forget to like, share, comment, all that jazz. I love reading your comments down below. But in the meantime, thank you as always for stopping by. I really do appreciate it. Take care of yourselves and I will talk to you in the next episode. Bye guys.